She's our first researcher / diva of the night. And because they're closest to getting out, I will do them first. Shirleene Robinson is a Senior Curator of Oral History at the National Library of Australia. That diva type. Let's see that. I'll pop you at the end, Shirleene. Is that all right? We'll bring you a mic in a second. Shirleene's also an Honorary Associate Professor of Modern History at Macquarie University. She has published extensively on LGBTIQ history and HIV and AIDS history. Recent works include the co-authored books Serving in Silence, Australian LGBT Servicemen and Women from 2018, and Pride in Defence, the Australian Military and Australian LGBTI Service since 1945, which was published in 2020. Thanks for joining us, Shirleene. Next up we have Paul Sendziuk. Welcome to the stage, Paul. Paul teaches Australian history at the University of Adelaide. He's an experienced oral historian and has expertise in the histories of immigration, disease and public health. His first book about the history of HIV/AIDS in Australia, Learning to Trust, Australian Responses to AIDS from 2003, was shortlisted for the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission's Human Rights Award for Non-Fiction. Thank you. And finally we have Robert Reynolds. Welcome to the stage, Robert. Robert's a Professor of Modern History at Macquarie University. He's written widely on the history of gay life in Australia, including books and essays in the print media. He has a particular interest in psychoanalysis and has trained as a psychotherapist. Welcome, Robert. And I'm Brandon. So we have a few questions tonight. I'm going to ask them and anyone can jump in and answer if you feel that that's appropriate. I might probe a little bit. That's something I'm known for. Calm down, table over there. I'm just going to start off with a nice general question for all of you. What attracted you to writing a history of volunteering during the HIV/AIDS crisis? And why do we need this book? I might start with you, Shirleene, because you were up first.
Okay, so I think I'll just speak personally and then the others may wish to sort of expand on that. But for me, I think it was, I guess for people who may not know what's been kind of written about the HIV and AIDS epidemic from an academic kind of perspective, it was, Paul had written this fantastic book called Learning to Trust, which is a really amazing history of the public policy response to HIV and AIDS. But I think that, and I know Paul, you've kind of said this, that an aspect that's really important that was pivotal to our really great response to HIV and AIDS in this country, and I think that we had one of the best responses in the world, was the role that volunteers played. And for me, I kind of personally became aware of that in Queensland, where even today I think that the Queensland AIDS Council, or QAC, plays a really important role in terms of LGBTIQ community representation and advocacy. So through my connections to that, I really saw the work they had done historically, and I guess the way that chapter of HIV and AIDS responses hadn't really been recognised, and there's probably a lot more to say about it, but I think that when we leave out the way that LGBTIQ people particularly contribute to volunteering, we leave out a really important part of Australian history, and we fail to recognise a really important contribution.
Does anyone else have anything they want to add?
No, I think I would say the same sort of thing. When I wrote Learning to Trust, it's often called the definitive history of responses to AIDS in Australia. And it looks at political responses and public health responses and community-based organisational responses, so the AIDS Council. But in that book, I was really looking at sort of the leadership of those organisations and senior people, the people whose names and faces were in the newspapers and who were kept in the paper archive. And that's what I was using. I was using the paper archive to write that book. And what I was embarrassed by when reading the book back, sort of 10 years later, was realising that the work of those organisations was only achieved through the work of volunteers, nameless, faceless volunteers who didn't appear in the paper archive. And the only way we're going to tell those stories is if we went and interviewed them and did oral histories with them and give them the due recognition that they deserve in that story, this amazing response to AIDS in this country.
If you're not speaking, just pop your microphone off with the little button. that again. So, one of the things I wanted to actually acknowledge the fact that there are people in this room tonight whose stories are shared in this book, and so I'd like to, for us all to acknowledge the people who are here in this room who are part of the story, and also those who are not who are not here in this room tonight. I think it's incredible to be able to share this with some of those people. I know I'm personally very honoured to have worked with some of those people in a few roles. But as you said, this was a mammoth task. There were so many people who were supporting this work. One of the things that I'm interested to know is, as three co-authors, how did you decide what was in and what was out in terms of these oral histories?
Well, because I'm the senior, I'm the professor, I just told them. Universities are very hierarchical, so they just debate. No, well, we wanted to make sure that we got, and we were just talking about this before actually, we wanted to make sure we got a good geographical mix. So I think we've covered people from most of the mainland. We missed out on Tasmania. And we also wanted to make sure that we had a mix of gender. So we often women's role in during the epidemic was underlooked as volunteers, despite the fact they were crucially important. And we wanted to get a mix of people who were HIV positive and HIV negative. So that, was there any other? I can't remember.
Oh, this is in terms of selection of people, yeah. And in fact, even sometimes we thought we knew who we were going to interview, and when you turned up and interviewed them, they turned out to be quite different. And they were not the gender that you thought, or that they were claiming to be, or they were quite a different sort of person. So we sometimes weren't even in complete control over who was in and who was out in terms of that. Are you interested in terms of who was in the book versus maybe whose story we couldn't include in the book?
Yeah, I mean, the publication is what we see at the end, so I'm super interested. How many more interviews were there versus stories in the book, and how did you make that curatorial decision?
Yeah, so we had, you want to ask me? Yeah, so we did 67 interviews, or interviews with 67 people, and there was even more who expressed an interest to be interviewed, and we weren't able to interview those people. And then I think when it came down to which stories we were going to be able to tell, once we decided each chapter was going to be based around one story, we wanted a person whose story was kind of emblematic of others. They were going to stand for other people, but yet there was still also something quite individual about them that was going to draw us into the book and make them interesting to read. And then, like you said, we wanted to have geographical coverage as much as possible, and some diversity in terms of gender and sex.
And I guess also that we wanted the book to tell a bit of a story over time. So you have people who are there in the very early stages of the epidemic and whose lives are fundamentally changed as a result of that. I mean, I think everyone who we spoke to's lives were fundamentally changed, but from the very early 80s all the way through to sort of about 1996. And so, you know, that the types of volunteering people did could be quite different, but hopefully as a whole, the chapters do tell that story of a remarkable contribution over time. And I think that it was not an easy choice to sort of think about who would be included. And I think there are many more books about this period in history that need to be written, and I'm sure that they will come out. And I hope that the materials that came out of the project we worked on in the form of the interviews can be potentially used by other people in the future as well. That would be really amazing.
Shirleene. One of the things that really struck me reading the foreword, which makes it sound like I didn't read the whole book, but I'm a researcher. Just read the abstract. Just read the abstract, it's fine. One of the things that really struck me about the foreword was the comments that were made about general volunteering in the LGBTQI community and the lack of data and the lack of recording of what happens in this space. And for me, having a book that celebrates LGBTQI volunteering, certainly within the HIV context, but more broadly in general, was very important to finally see that recognition. And I really got that as a purpose of the book. But it's great to actually have the authors here where you can ask the question, when you put these stories together, what was your purpose or intent of this book? What do you want people to get out of it?
I think we want to change the narrative because it's really interesting that John Howard actually was the Prime Minister, despite, I'm sure this wasn't his intention, but he collected statistics about the number of Australians who volunteer. And those statistics were also collected when people identified their LGBTIQ status as well. So we have a bit of information about the ways in which LGBTIQ people volunteer, and we know enough to know that the statistics show that, and this will probably be something that everyone here knows, that LGBTIQ people do volunteer in slightly higher numbers actually than the broader population. And I think that's something that we don't really know, or that isn't really emphasised in a wider way. And I think that Australians celebrate volunteers. We're a country that talk a lot about our national identity being linked to volunteers. So, firefighters, people who do that kind of rural volunteering, country women's associations and surf lifesavers. But there's this really important type of volunteering that happens for quite a considerable time period. It's really, really important. It lets us have a world-leading response, yet it's something that doesn't have that broader public knowledge and traction. So I think we really wanted to correct that, and we want people to know that something really remarkable happened here, and that this was key to our amazing response to HIV and AIDS.
Yes. I think, although it's a history of volunteers, through the volunteers it's also a wider, broader history of the epidemic in Australia, in particular in relation to kind of gay communities. And certainly one thing I was really interested in was getting the on-the-ground, day-to-day experience of what it was like to be in the middle of that storm. And we all have, different interests and different expertise, and I was particularly interested in kind of the emotional impact that had on people, and your kind of average person, not necessarily the high-flying activist or the government bureaucrat, what it was just like to be in the trenches, so to speak, caring for people as they died.
I mean, related to that point is we are a community of communities, and we experience that and we share that with each other. And so even working with the LGBTQI community broadly as a sort of populational target, as both an audience and subjects, is a challenge. How did you find, whether it was through recruitment or through interviewing or through working with people who came from more marginalised sections of these communities, so sex workers, people who were injecting drug users, and I guess even at that time women who were not at the forefront of the conversation around this. What was the process of bringing those stories out, and how important was it to make sure that those stories were included as part of this, I guess, this picture of the time?
Sorry, I'm not sure if this is working. But yeah, I think that it was really, really important because certainly the role of women, I can speak a little bit about that. We definitely wanted to make sure that was included in the book. Quite simple. So we really wanted to make sure that the experiences of women was captured, because I think that it has been not sufficiently acknowledged in the way that it should be. There are heterosexual women who did remarkable things, so it was really important that we did write that in there as well. I think that, Brandon, a point that you made about people who are particularly marginalised within the LGBTIQ community, it was really important that we tried to address that and include those perspectives. And I think we did some interviews with sex workers, and a really remarkable response. Probably one of the most moving interviews I did was with somebody who was a sex worker and a volunteer, and talked really openly about some of the challenges involved in that particular experience. We recognise that there are other perspectives that do still need to be gathered, so there's certainly more work to be done on including those. There are perspectives that we probably have lost because unfortunately people have passed away, so we did have that challenge of trying to create something when a lot of people who did volunteer unfortunately are no longer with us. But I think hopefully as a whole, what we can do can perhaps point the way to a contribution that it really was extraordinary, and I think it drew together a lot of really different people who managed to come together to achieve something that made such a difference to so many people.
I think, Brandon, as well, not everybody who was interviewed wanted to be included in the book and have their story written up. It's actually a really confronting thing to have someone else write up and tell your story in 5,000 words and know that not only a room full of people, but hopefully many more people will read the book and find out about you. It was really confronting for us once we wrote the chapters to send it back to the people and say, what do you think of this? Have we told this story right? And know that we had spent a lot of hard work writing those chapters, and we wouldn't have a book if they all said no. So we're very grateful for the ones that said yes, but certainly we knew there was ones when we interviewed them, they were very happy to be interviewed, but they did not want that to be published.
And we were able to use their testimony to inform the types of questions that we asked other people, and that corroborated stories, so we knew that we're on the right track. And so they contributed to what is in the book in that sense, but they're not there necessarily in the book, standing out with their names on there as well.
I guess that probably leads me to my last question for this section before we have some more food. Oral history is such an interesting part of history because by its very nature you're dealing with something that, yes, it's part of our past, it's part of who we are as a community and indeed as a country, but it's also something that people are still living and experiencing, that people in the book, the people who the book talks about, if they're with us, they're with us, and if they're not, they're our friends, they're our parents, they're our intergenerational leaders that we no longer have. How do you write a book about a history that at one point seems so far away in the cultural context of Australia, but in another part is so intrinsically still part of how we are and who we are as LGBTQI communities?
I'll start a little bit on that one. Part of the way I think you do that, or certainly part of the way I like to do that, is you kind of write the interview itself into the book, because the interview, you're talking about the past and it's unfolding in the present as you talk. So one of the things I like to do is kind of pick up on what goes on during the interview and then write that into the book in a way that actually can sometimes illuminate the past. I'll give you one example. One of the blokes I interviewed, Trevor, whose brother had died in the early years of HIV/AIDS, of the AIDS epidemic, and as we were talking, he started to get flashbacks of seeing his brother dead in the hospital bed. And that's to my ear, that's kind of post-traumatic stress syndrome, that the past ruptures the present in a really visceral way. So that's how one way you can do it.
I think I'd like to talk more after we come back in the second bit about the experience of the participants, especially, and the interview process. And I think that's a very interesting conversation. But I honestly, having read the stories in there, the way that the present is folded into the past, I think is incredible, and it's such a balance. And as I said earlier, I know a few people in this room who I've worked with who are in the book, and sort of understanding that I spoke to those people every day on a day-to-day basis, but then also they have this whole history that was culturally defining, was so incredible and so well done. I'd like to thank our three panelists for this first part of the discussion. Stay here for 1 second before you go back. I have a few more announcements. You can all look lovely on stage. And again, thank you for the work you've done. Before we tuck into our main course, I would like to announce the next literary events. And usually it's just one, but ladies, gentlemen, non-binary folk, everyone in the room with us today, it is 2 literary dinners coming up. I do have the books, but I forgot to bring them up with me, but they are, they're on my chair, just in front of the ACON banner. Louis can bring them up. This is why you bring a +1. To coincide with the publication of his memoir in a new paperback edition, the bookshop Darlinghurst will present David McAllister, who is very well known as a principal dancer and then artistic director at the Australian Ballet. Excuse my paper folding here. His memoir, I have one here. His memoir, Saw a Life in Dance, was published late last year. He will be in conversation with someone who's become a household name when it comes to dance in Australia, star of stage and screen and the small screen, Todd McKenney. The literary dinner will take place once again here at Soy 25, a restaurant, on Wednesday the 21st of July. Then again in August, it's non-stop, the bookshop Darlinghurst will present leading Australian chef Annie Smithers, who is well known for her paddock to plate restaurant de Fermier in regional Victoria. Annie's memoir with recipes, Recipe for a Kinder Life, which is this lovely one, will be published in August. I'm holding a book that's not even been published yet, which just feels very exciting to me as a big nerd. And she'll be in conversation with Chef Christine Manfield. So the sad thing about these 2 dinners, no me, but obviously amazing human beings talking about amazing works. Christine Manfield is little introduction to Sydney-siders, but is fondly remembered for her restaurants Paramount and Universal. The bookshop Darlinghurst is especially pleased that both Annie and Christine are making themselves available and travelling from interstate for this event. This dinner will take place on Wednesday the 11th of August, again here at Soy 25. ACON will be the primary presenting partner for both of these events, so thank you ACON, which doesn't feel weird to say now that I don't work there. Further support has also been provided by City of Sydney Nighttime Diversification Grant and the publisher of both books, Thames and Hudson Australia. Tickets can be purchased at the bookshop store this evening, just behind me, or you can buy from their website. The events are featured on their homepage. The event has not been officially announced yet, so these are special pre-sale tickets. The surprises keep coming. You thought I didn't read the book, turns out I didn't read the notes. No, I read all of them, I'm very professional. Thank you once again to our three panelists. We'll see you again after dinner, but we're now moving on to our main course. Please enjoy your meal. Thank you again.